from a place-based perspective, and more specifically about the results from the case study in Aalst that we've done this past year. My name is Dorien Gryp. I'm a PhD researcher at the Thomas More University of Applied Sciences, and my colleague Freya Häussermann is here with me as well. She's also a PhD researcher working at the University of Brussels. So, yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of our presentation. So a brief overview of what we'll talk about. So we'll start with a brief introduction on loneliness and how we understand it in our research. Then we'll move on to loneliness and the neighborhood as our topic, in which we will share results on 3 different aspects, more specifically the social neighborhood, the physical neighborhood, and the neighborhood life story. We'll talk more about what we mean by that, and we'll share results from interviews and focus groups in Aalst and in the other cases as well, where we've done our research. And we'll end, of course, with a conclusion where we try to think with you, together with you, of interventions and strategies in the local context. A bit about our research project. So it is, A Lonely Planet is a strategic basic research which receives funding from the Flemish Research Foundation, and which means it's an academic research, but with a societal component. So we always try to look at society as well, and what we can, how we can translate our research findings for society. It's a 4-year project, and we are currently in our last year. And we are working together with 3 partners. KU Leuven is taking the lead in this project, and then together with the Thomas More University of Applied Sciences and the University of Brussels, we are conducting this research. And within this research project, we aim to complement the individual focus on loneliness with a more neighborhood perspective on loneliness. Below you can see our website, which is in Dutch and in English, and you can find our research content and results there as well. So loneliness, is it a hot item? In the Flemish context, we see that in media and in policy, loneliness, its consequences and how to deal with loneliness is receiving more and more attention. And we brought together some Flemish examples of campaigns, of actions, strategies that focus on, for example, specific age groups or specific target groups, such as loneliness within the field of mental health, targeting loneliness through connecting with others. So you see, in practice, you see a lot of movement already. But before we actually dig in the definitions, let us ask you a question. What do you think of when you think of loneliness? And we have prepared a Mentimeter for that, so you can scan the QR code, and then you can fill in what your first thoughts are when you think of loneliness, and if everything goes well, it will appear on the screen as well. Okay, so we are receiving some answers already. A lonely person, isolation, a lack of light. I'm just gonna highlight a few of them: a state of not belonging, a feeling that you don't fit in. Being new in a country might be a context which can trigger loneliness as well. Not feeling a part of a near context. I see some target groups as well: migration, elderly people, having nobody to talk to. Okay, so let's move on and see how, in general, in academia, loneliness is defined. Well, let me first start by stating that loneliness is not the same as social isolation. Social isolation is an objective measure. It's about a lack in the number of social relationships, and you can actually count it. And loneliness, on the other hand, is an individual feeling, and it's a subjective feeling, and it is generally defined as an unpleasant experience, a negative experience that occurs when a person's network of social relations is deficient in some important way, and it can be both quantitatively or qualitatively, so both in terms of how many social relations you have, but also the quality of them, how you define them as being qualitative enough or not. There's a lot of discussion on this definition in itself, but let's not go into detail about that right now. But it is different from social isolation. And we also want to highlight that loneliness is there's different dimensions of loneliness that exist. Some people saying it's hidden. It has to do with the context you're in. Some of the responses that we read in the Mentimeter, but we see that there are different dimensions of loneliness. The first one being emotional loneliness, which is about lacking a deep connection, an intimate bond with, for example, a partner or a best friend. Social loneliness, on the other hand, is defined as a feeling of a lack of a broader social network. So it has to do with a network of friends or neighbors, for example. And then we can also distinguish existential loneliness, which has more to do with a feeling of like fundamental separation from others and from the world. A feeling of asking yourself, what is my purpose in life? And then collective loneliness has to do with a sense of not feeling that you belong to a specific group, such as a cultural group or within a youth organization, for example. And all of these dimensions of loneliness ask also for different answers. And when we look at loneliness research, but also loneliness practice, throughout the years, a lot of emphasis is put on loneliness as being an individual experience, but also with having individual risk factors and individual life events leading to loneliness, or that might lead to loneliness. And although all of this is true, we also see that solutions or answers to loneliness often point in the same individual direction, such as aiming to enhance social skills or guiding towards social activities or providing psychological help for lonely people. And these all might be valuable, but the neighborhood and the area where you live might also be of importance for loneliness as well. But little is known about the relationship between the neighborhood and loneliness. And that's why we wanted to focus on that relationship between loneliness and the neighborhood within our research. And in general, we focus on three main questions. So first of all, we want to know more about which neighborhood characteristics can relate to the risk of loneliness. It can be about what the neighborhood looks like or how people interact with each other within the neighborhood. But which characteristics are then important for the risk of loneliness. Second question we ask ourselves within this research is, how do these characteristics relate to the risk of loneliness? If we know which ones matter, but how do they relate? And then a third question that we ask is, okay, and what can we do in the neighborhood to prevent or reduce loneliness? And we do this by employing a mixed method design using both quantitative and qualitative methods. The quantitative part is that we've set up a loneliness survey throughout Flanders, and the qualitative part exists of several methods. We have performed photo elicitation interviews with people who feel lonely. We have done interviews with local experts, and we have set up neighborhood case studies, one of which took place in Aalst, with walking interviews and neighborhood life stories. So just a little bit about the survey. There were over 3,500 adults who filled in our survey in Flanders, and the survey covered several themes, such as the physical and social living environment, of course. What does your neighborhood look like? How do you perceive your neighborhood? Mobility and travel, but also your social network, social participation within your neighborhood and within your life. We, as often happens in surveys, we've also asked about some socio-demographics, and then we've also covered the topic of social exclusion and some more as well. And then the neighborhood case studies had to do with, a neighborhood case is actually, can be a specific place, but it can also be a neighborhood, a demarcated neighborhood, or just a few streets that we investigate with regard to loneliness. And we have performed neighborhood life stories in focus groups, and we've also done a lot of walk-along interviews with residents of each of the neighborhoods. And we have selected 4 cases in Flanders and Brussels. Together, these 4 cases provided some variety in types of cases. With qualitative research, it's never our goal to be representative over the whole of Flanders, but these provide some variety, ranging. For example, the first one, it's Stavelen. It's a very rural and remote village. But then the second one, the Aneses neighborhood in Brussels, is a very densely populated area in the city center of Brussels. And then, of course, we have today we specifically focus on Aalst and on our main findings of Aalst, with some additional examples from other cases. Aalst is, as many of you may know, a smaller city in Flanders, and we've focused on an area that lays a bit on the outskirts of the city, with lots of greenery, yet with easy access to the city center by public transport, for example. And we've also brought some general numbers from our survey. This slide is in Dutch, but I'll briefly go through it. On the left-hand side, we see that when asking the question, how lonely do you feel? We see that 37% of adults responded to sometimes or often feeling lonely, of which 31% sometimes and 6% often. But feeling lonely is also a feeling that is, for many people, normal and part of life. And so on the right-hand side, we ask the question of how long those feelings of loneliness last. And we see that 8 out of 10 people respond that the feelings of loneliness last only maximally a few days. And in 75% of the cases, those feelings are light to moderate intensity. And beside numbers, we also want to stress that loneliness is something that occurs in all ages. We often think of loneliness as being something that only older people experience, but in fact, numbers show that also young people that there's also loneliness among young people, but loneliness can take different forms at different ages, and there's a lot of research still to be done with regard to this. But we see, for example, that for younger people, there are many changes that take place in their lives, such as changing social networks that can trigger insecurities. Finding a new job or a first job, creating a family, moving houses, those are life patterns that can trigger a loneliness. And for older people, we see that social loneliness generally decreases, but emotional loneliness increases, and this might be due to changes in social networks, such as friends and relatives passing away. And when looking at the numbers of loneliness by age, our results show this as well. This graph shows that those feeling sometimes or often lonely, which are the lighter yellow and the orange bars, are more frequently situated in the younger and the older age groups. And when asking in our survey what helps when feeling lonely, we see that the potential that the neighborhood and the built environment can play becomes clear, because most often people state that that being able to chat with someone or looking for distraction or walking are strategies that they employ when feeling lonely. And in our focus groups and interviews, we also noticed that we've brought some pictures from our interviews as well, that people talked about having places that are walkable, that you can walk with friends, but also alone, places where you can look for distraction, places that invite you to chat with other people are important to have within a neighborhood. We see that green spaces matter a lot, or are preferred. The quality of the built environment matters as well, and having places to rest and reflect is, with regard to loneliness, quite important as well. So let's dig a bit deeper in the relation between loneliness and the neighborhood. In our research, we state that if you want to better understand loneliness, you also have to look at where people live. This statement is something that my colleagues and I wrote in an article on the website sociaal.net. It's a Flemish website on social work research and practice. And when relating the neighborhood to loneliness, many people think of the neighborhood as the social neighborhood, but we also want to stress that the physical neighborhood is important as well, and the neighborhood life story, so the changes taking place in a neighborhood, the history of a neighborhood, are important when it comes to loneliness. And for now, this might sound a bit vague, but that's because Freya will tell you all about it. But first, I still want to ask you a question with the Mentimeter again. So how would, according to you, the neighborhood play a role in loneliness? So let me just check. Yeah, so you can scan the QR code again and then fill in if you have an idea. There are no wrong answers, of course. So if we talk about the social and physical neighborhood and the neighborhood history, what do you think of how the neighborhood would play a role in loneliness? I see some people talking about third places. It can facilitate possibilities for talking and being with others, places where you can meet others, or the lack of places where you can meet others. Is something happening in my area? Sorry, I wanted to scroll, but that doesn't unfortunately seem to work. Green spaces, consume-free places to meet. Green and nature always makes you feel better. No research needed, it's just a fact. Access of community areas, social events. Okay, let's move on, and I'm giving the floor to Freya, who will talk all about how the social and physical neighborhood and the neighborhood life story is important for loneliness.
Yes, I hope everybody can hear me well. Thank you, Dorien. So when we are talking about the social neighborhood, we think often about our neighbors, but also passerbys and individuals who work in the area are part of this social neighborhood. And these everyday interactions with these people in the neighborhood affect loneliness. When looking into the survey, we asked people how they perceive the contact they had with their neighbors. And as you can see in the graph, people who reported having poor contact with their neighbors also reported to be lonelier. And the importance of neighborhood context is also illustrated by a participant who took a picture of her neighbors and said, well, those are my neighbors, and they never ask me to join. And I say hello to everyone, but I don't always get a hello in return. And another participant also explained the importance of people who work in the neighborhood in regards to loneliness and told us in this cafe is a nice place because owners recognize me. I chat a bit with them and I often see the same people there. That familiarity creates a sense of connection. Being regular somewhere makes me feel more settled and at home. Also, the physical neighborhood is important when it comes to loneliness. So the physical neighborhood includes the distance to key facilities, but also the presence of, for example, lighting or noise nuances, and the quality of footpaths, cycle paths, benches. And these elements influence how easily people can move around, meet others, and feel comfortable outdoors, and therefore also affects loneliness. The distance, when we look at the survey data, yes, we also see that loneliness increases as distance to certain facilities becomes longer. For example, we see that when with green spaces, for example, as when green spaces are more than 30 minutes away, adults in Flanders report higher levels of loneliness. And then yes, we also see this in Aalst, in the case we researched. So for many residents, the Rozekusbos is a very important physical place in the nearby neighborhood because it feels natural, it's beautiful, it's well designed, and people appreciate the benches, the long picnic tables, the rubbish bins that are placed there, and the use of natural materials. As a participant told us, everything is made from tree trunks, and there's nothing made of plastic. And despite its value, the Rozekusbos is a physical place that helps with loneliness. the Rosenkranzbos is not always accessible. Sometimes the paths are too wet when it's raining a lot, and there might be too few benches. And some residents also feel unsafe in that area in the evening. One participant explained and said, I used to often walk through the Rosenkranzbos with a dog at night, and although there were more hedges and such back then, I wasn't as scared as I am now. I used to feel safer going outside at night. I used to feel safer going outside at night or in the dark than I do now. So this also plays a part. Yes. So also nature provides a place to be alone without feeling isolated or lonely. A neighborhood that offers comfort a neighborhood that offers also comfort when it provides a variety of welcoming people, and it makes them feel like they belong. And with nature spaces in the neighborhood, such as the Rosenkranzbos, it provides a space where you can be alone in the nature, where you can be on your own, or where you are allowed to be alone. But it's also where you can be alone and see others, because there is a diversity of things that people go there and engage with. And you feel welcome there. A participant explained, I come to the Rosenkranzbos to explain loneliness, actually. To sit in the green, to sit in the nature. It's different. It's a different feeling outside than inside, isn't it? It's different feeling in nature than among those concrete blocks. A third way that is also important, or why nature places are important, is seeing familiar faces helps people to feel seen and to also feel connected, because they can encounter the same people at those places. And a fourth way that it's also important for loneliness is that you can go together with other people that you already know to visit these places. But what is interesting is that these places did not provide like new encounters, getting to know new people. As a participant told us, in the Rosenkranzbos, you meet people and sometimes you know people there and you keep talking to them. But with strangers, I think that's going to be more difficult. It's going to be more difficult. And then it was mentioned before also, the social infrastructures also play an important role, and it was said before in the Mentimeter third places. So when we talk about social infrastructure, we often refer to as third places, meaning those are places that are not your home or your work, such as cafes, benches, or community spaces that are important to establish or enabling spontaneous or planned meetings. And the disappearance of these places where people can meet, it makes that you have less contact with your neighbors and less contact with people that work in the neighborhoods. And then you also are less aware what actually is happening in the neighborhood. And all these things can influence loneliness. So this is also illustrated by a quote. Somebody says, eventually everything disappeared and people were forced to a certain extent. Well, they were not forced, but they also returned to a certain loneliness where there is no contact either. And also redevelopment. There is also there's also a difference. Sorry. It's okay. And there's also a difference between temporary meeting places and more static meeting places. Temporary meeting places are places where there are events, for example, the marketplace, and static places are really like the physical static places, as in the community center. And it helps people going more outside, and as a a participant told us it helps breaking loneliness. And one of the participants told us there has to be enough spaces in the neighborhood that provide these opportunities to meet others. So there has to be a sufficient capacity to tackle loneliness in the neighborhood. So the physical neighborhood, what helps is, people have to know what is there available in the neighborhood. They also have to be, there has to be a variety of things to do in the neighborhood. It cannot be only one thing, but also that these places are accessible, like also physically as accessible, but also financially accessible. Also, it's important that these places are attractive. With attractiveness, people meant more, well, the places have to be well maintained, or the use of high quality materials. And people would also have to have the desire to go or feel compelled to go to these places in the neighborhood. And what is also important is this sense of ownership that you have over these places in the neighborhood, that it feels that these places are also a bit of our places. So one of the participants told, within the radius of 5-6 kilometers, there is only a place it's the only place, and the participant was referring to the Rosekustbos, that is accessible for everyone, and that doesn't cost any money. And then last but not least, also the neighborhood life story plays a role when it comes to loneliness. The neighborhood life story first refers to how in the neighborhood changes happen over time, and these changes can influence people's sense, neighborhoods, residents' sense of identity, belonging, and continuity, and therefore also can affect loneliness. And when we see at the data, we also see that loneliness rises when people feel that their neighborhood has deteriorated over the course of time. And so this means that also positive changes can also reduce loneliness, while negative changes can actually increase loneliness. And what the life story, so people who live in the neighborhood share a sort of common collective identity and a feeling of being rooted, and which helps with loneliness. And this rootedness arises when you, over time, know who lives in your neighborhood, and you know the history of your neighborhood. And when you feel at home in your neighborhood, when you have memories and shared memories with this neighborhood. And all these factors influence a sense of belonging to the neighborhood. As a participant told us, the village, the neighborhood provides a sense of security because it's small scaled, and also because in the village we usually know a lot of people. Everybody says hello to each other, and we have like chats with each other. When we talk about the neighborhood's life story, participant talked first about demographic changes in the neighborhood. It goes that people explain that rapid demographic changes can make it harder to recognize your neighbors and understand each other's habits. And it can hinder more spontaneous interactions, and therefore also affect loneliness. As one of our younger respondents who works outside of the neighborhood, they explained that, I come often very late home, so I don't knock on my neighbors' doors anymore to say hello and to say, hey, let's have a chat. So these demographic changes can also affect how we interact with each other in the neighborhood, and therefore also affect loneliness. But also the physical changes were talked about, and these physical changes can make residents feel more alienated from their surroundings, and leading to more withdrawal of engaging with the neighborhood. As one of our participants explained, if you live in a neighborhood and you have an overview, a general picture of your neighborhood, and you can situate yourself, and that person lives there, and that person there, So you can situate where you are and you know where your neighbors are. But with the influx of a huge number of new people, you lose that overview, and then you let go. You let go you let go, and your inner circle of acquaintances becomes smaller. And it's not over yet because yeah, there is the neighborhood is still growing, and you still lose that oversight. So to conclude, we made of all the conclusions we make of all the results we made, uh, yeah, we try to capture in this figure our results. I'm not gonna go over this results, but maybe I will go directly to the next slide because I think this is very important. So in addressing loneliness is not only working at the individual level, but it's also from a social neighborhood and the physical neighborhood level that we have to approach loneliness. So for example, when we address loneliness from an individual approach, the purpose is, well, fewer people have to be less lonely, and then we are going to tackle loneliness by detecting lonely people. And how do we do this? We do this temporarily with interventions, programs, campaigns, and actions that we do. But when we look at, for example, at the social neighborhood, then the purpose is actually neighborhoods where people can care about each other and where everybody belongs. And how do we do this? Is more meandering, searching, and initiating social connections and strength with neighborhoods, finding connectors in the neighborhood, people who can share something with each other. And this is more a permanent way that we do this. And the contributions focus on the daily lives of people in the neighborhoods. And then from a physical approach, we want to have neighborhoods that people use and that connect with themselves and others and the neighborhood. And we do this by improving the physical space, by paying attention to mobility, to safety, to being and doing places, and inviting and accessible places where people can meet each other and do things alone or with each other. And this is also more permanent. It considers structural interventions in the public, semi-public, and in the build-up spaces in the neighborhood. So I would also like to ask the question like, what interventions or good practices do you think of when addressing loneliness from a neighborhood perspective? And this can be also on the individual or the physical or the social neighborhood. Or maybe also sharing good practices that you have in your neighborhoods. I see opening meeting spaces, neighborhood centers, accessible cultural events, shared workshops, yes. Small area gatherings like festivals, walk and talk meetups are free to join. So very much accessibility, meeting each other for a cup of tea, eating together. Also professionals in the neighborhoods to connect people. So lots of ideas, and maybe it's a nice way to go to the next slide, where we like to invite you if there are any questions, and tell if you want to know more, you can always reach out to us and or visit our website. But if there are any questions, we like to answer them for you.
So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We haven't received any questions yet, but you can always type them in the chat. If not, then we can thank all of you for participating in this webinar today. We hope you had an inspiring session, and feel free to reach out to us or to Freya and Dorien if you have any questions or would like to share on this topic. Thank you very much. I can see one question now, Freya and Dorien.
Yeah, Freya, the question is, have you talked to professionals working in the common residence spaces? Freya, you have done focus groups with professionals. Maybe you can tell a bit what the purpose was and how you did it.
I have talked in the focus group with professionals, and they also shared their light on loneliness, and specifically in the coming residence spaces. I don't think there were any participants from the professionals that were linked to the common residence spaces, but what was interesting that the people that worked in the neighborhood, they also acknowledged that the importance of not only having the professional there, but also have more the structural solutions of making to tackle loneliness. Yeah. I see also, how do people react when you ask them about loneliness? Do they hesitate to talk about their feelings about loneliness? How do you, maybe Dorien, you did the walk alone interviews. Maybe you can share a bit of your
This is
experience.
something that thank you, Freya. This is something that we've talked about a lot within our team, how to approach people with a sensitive topic such as loneliness. For some people, it's very easy to talk about it, but for others, there's a lot of taboo and stigma on the topic. But we decided that it is best to frame the topic transparently and openly. So when we within the first talk that we had with people, we framed it as being, we are researchers on the topic of the relation between loneliness and the neighborhood. And we also stressed that, first of all, loneliness is a feeling that is normal, that is part of life, that many people experience throughout their lives. And then second of all, that, well, you don't have to be or feel lonely to participate in the research. We also want to get a good idea of how the neighborhood can be of importance for preventing loneliness, for ameliorating connections, and feeling good in your neighborhood. So we want to have that broad idea, and but yet still. When talking with people about loneliness, and when actually naming the concept, for some you felt hesitations. I think that's very normal as well. Yeah, but we also tried to be very delicate about it as well within our research. And I see that above it there was another question. Yes. I'll just read it aloud. Thank you very much for the presentation. I come from a part of the world where there is a need for more private spaces. The lack of such places is something that leads to a negative feeling of loneliness. Could any of the participants relate to this sort of an aspect leading to loneliness? I'm not sure. Yeah, Freya, can you elaborate?
I was just going to ask for the person who's asked this question, what do you mean by private spaces? Because does it mean places where you can be more in private, or is it? privatized places. Because when it's about places where you can be alone and that are more where you don't have to encounter people, I think lots of our participants getting privacy. Okay, so yes, I think a lot of our participants could relate to this, and which was also an interesting finding, because we often think that when we tackle loneliness, it's about providing social places where you can feel socially connected to people, but we actually had quite often participants saying that the neighborhood was actually a place where you could escape loneliness from the loneliness that you feel inside the house, and where you can also just go and clear your head and be alone without necessarily having to interact with people. So yes, a lot of participants valued places where they could also be alone.
Yeah, and to add, we also saw that there was a diversity, not only people saying this is a place where I like to come to reduce feeling of loneliness, but also to cope with those feelings of loneliness, just to reflect on life when things are difficult, and then choosing specific places because they are of high quality and nice looking, and you can be alone there or feel have a feeling that you can let go of your feelings and they are allowed to be there, and not being looked at for it. So those type of places were very important as well.
I see one more question, Dorien, then, and I will read it out loud as well. Was there a difference in approaching young people and older people? Who was more hesitant to talk about it? I don't know who.
For me, there are two things we can say about it.
Yeah.
First of all, we found that it was a lot more difficult to get to know younger people. We started from the age of 18, but the age range of 18 to, let's say, 35 was difficult to reach, more difficult to contact. And that might have something to do with the topic, but it might also be related to the stage of life that you're in, or we're still guessing a bit about that. But then within the conversations that we had, I think it's not that easy to say, oh, younger people were more hesitant or older people were more hesitant. I think it didn't really it was not really age related in my view. I don't know if you have experienced the same, Freya.
I have the same feeling that with people when the people were talking about loneliness, and even in the first study that we did, and not necessarily in the focus groups, I also didn't experience that there was a feeling of hesitation of talking about loneliness. But the first step in talking about loneliness, it was harder to reach indeed the young participants. But we are still guessing if it was because of maybe school hours or not being that interested in participating in the research topic. And yeah. Have you studied how could be sports or culture associations in dealing with loneliness, or how public politics must be in this area? And no apology. Yeah,
sorry.
No apologies about the English level. I was going to say.
No, we haven't specifically targeted our research towards how specific associations might be of importance for dealing with loneliness, but we noticed that throughout our talks with people, these aspects showed up. For example, people saying that feeling included in a sports association felt for them as a place also to feel at home, to be with friends. So it did matter, but we didn't. Well, we actually focused on the neighborhood in itself and social and physical aspects of the neighborhood, and not specifically on sports or culture associations. You're welcome. Any other questions?
I see people usually know the problems in their neighborhood, but do not always know how to address them. How can they get help to improve their environment? What could be a first step to get started? Maybe I can start with this, with the, and maybe you can add, Dorien. So yes, indeed, people know what lives in their neighborhoods, and sometimes it's not easy to get started. What was interesting in the neighborhood case studies we did, so we talked about loneliness, but in the focus groups, for example, the people really felt the moment that moment where they were heard and that they were included in thinking about this. And my experience was like, if you really start bottom up and just take a topic and bring people together around the table and talk about the topic, this can help them to get steps and ideas forward, because they can have a shared experience, and not necessarily because they feel lonely, but because they acknowledge that there can be loneliness in the neighborhood. So I think it was a way, the research in itself was a way to actually get people connected and talk about the topic and think about how they could have improvements. And for us, it was also an opportunity to share this with the neighborhoods, the policymakers in the neighborhoods, to think with people about these things. And I think that was also an acknowledgement of the communities to these people who participated. I don't know if you have to add something, Dorien.
I was just thinking of local actors being present in the neighborhood and what their role could be, to when you start bottom up, and they can play a role in translating it or upscaling it or bringing together ideas. That might be a way as well, but I think there are many possibilities, and it's often a case of trial and error and persistency. And then there's another question on, are people more lonely in areas with high concentration of people with social challenges? That's actually quite an interesting question, because we have a colleague who is working on the survey, doing an analysis on the over 3,500 responses that we've received from our survey, and he will focus on that question as well, in trying to create a sort of typology of neighborhoods, to provide an answer to that question for you as well. And
maybe
so keep an eye on our website as well. When it's published, we'll definitely share it there.
I can also share that there was research before done in London, in the area of London, where they created heat maps and with demographic profiles of people, and it was loneliness heat maps. So they discovered that there are places and concentrations of people with challenges in certain neighborhoods. So it was I'm thinking what study was called. I can provide the information later on, or send us an email, but I can provide the study. But it was a study in London where they had heat maps of loneliness.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we would like to thank Freya and Dorien for this very interesting presentation. And we would like to thank all of you for participating and joining us today. Hopefully we will see again each other soon for more interesting webinars on the topic. And we will definitely be sharing the presentation with all of you. I'm not quite sure as to how, but we will make sure that all of you receive the presentation, so you can also check the website and follow us for more information on the topic. Thank you kindly and have a very nice day. Bye.